In accordance with the well-known principle that every political outrage eventually yields to an equal and opposite complacency, the initial uproar over Georgia's voter law has lately given way to a spate of, "it's not that bad after all," punditry takes. A representative example of this comes from Ulsalitan of Slate, who in a facile Twitter thread divides the law's provisions into good stuff, bad stuff, and overhyped. Another newspaper analysis credulously asserts that the law is unlikely to significantly affect turnout or Democratic chances, and could plausibly even increase turnout. These arguments track those of Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who signed the law behind locked doors March 25 and is happy to blame the blowback on liberal activists. So let's get the basics out of the way promptly. The Georgia law isn't as bad as its critics say. It's much, much worse, in ways that election law experts fully understand. It's been dismaying to see some of the coverage saying that those who are worried about the law's driving down turnout are overhyping it, says Charlotte Hill, an elections expert at UC Berkeley. That's the wrong take. A somewhat different variety of complacency has infected Georgia's leading corporate citizens, notably Delta Airlines and Coca Cola Co., which are both headquartered in Atlanta. Neither company spoke out publicly against the law while it was making its way through the Georgia legislature. Both spoke out against it after it was signed and they came under pressure to take a stand. Both have called it unacceptable. But as Judd Legum of Popular Information has documented, both corporations were campaign contributors to the legislators who supported the bill. Neither company has said what it's going to do about it, now that the horse has left the barn. Let's examine what the Complacency Caucus gets wrong about the Georgia bill. Start with the increasingly common notion that cutting back on absentee voting, as the bill does, will have little effect on voter turnout. The measure forbids mass unsolicited mailings of absentee ballots, shortens the window in which voters can request them, raises identification requirements for those who cast them and places limits on the number and location of drop boxes where ballots can be deposited. The argument that cutting back on absentee ballots won't significantly suppress turnout is based on research findings that turnout wasn't significantly increased in states where absentee voting was expanded. The problem with that logic, Hill told me, is that much of that research dates from more than 10 years ago, when the absentee voting cohort was dramatically different from today. Back then, the voters most affected by the expansion were older, already committed voters, who typically leaned Republican. There wasn't likely to be much of an increase in turnout among voters who already tended to turn out in force. The 2020 election, however, occurred during a pandemic.